Hello, everyone. Thank you for watching The Naturalist Capitalist. I'm your host, Reed Coverdale, coming to you from my truck in the middle of nowhere in Arizona. And I'm excited to have Clint from Liberty Lockdown on the other end. How's it going, Clint?
I'm good. Liberty Lockdown, checking in. What's up, people? Sorry, I haven't done a live stream before, so I wanted to get all hype.
Oh, no, it's great. I'm glad I'm your first live stream. So you made episode 90, and I started this show about a year ago, a little less than a year ago. I really started cranking on it in May, but we were just talking. We had a similar start time, and our show has kind of grown at a commensurate rate, and we've had a lot of the same people on. But why don't you just tell everyone about your show and why you started it, and how it's grown and what's going on with it now?
Sure. I'm Clint from Liberty Lockdown. Liberty Lockdown was started in, I think it was May of 2020. So it was like right in the heart of the lockdowns. I was a mortgage broker and an entrepreneur for, I had my own company for 7.5 years, and I worked for a family business for like a decade before that. So that was what I was about. And I achieved a lot of financial goals. And then the lockdowns basically made it so that it was too treacherous to continue down that same path of lending on real estate. I was very concerned about a real estate collapse coming. I didn't obviously know the amount of stimulus that was going to be pumped into the system to keep us afloat, delaying and kicking the can down the road. So I was inspired in that moment in May to start my own show and essentially rail against the lockdowns, hence the name of the show, Liberty Lockdown, because our liberties had been locked down. So that's pretty much as simple as it gets. And then as far as, the growth and how I've kind of matched yours, it's just been for about a year prior to that, I had really dove into Twitter. And just as like my outlet to stay sane, I encountered a whole bunch of similarly minded people that still espoused these beliefs that I had that I was not encountering in my day-to-day life. It made me feel like I had a home again. It made me feel like I was not alone in this fight. And apparently people liked what I had to say. The account blew up quickly, and then the show doing kind of a similar structure that you did, having on guests with large Twitter followings, kind of helped to get the word out as to my existence. And then Pete Quinones kind of really launched me into the stratosphere when he mentioned me I'm part of the problem with Dave Smith. And then Dave came on and blah, blah, blah. Rest is history. Same as you.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so funny. You said the other day that you were libertarian thought with that like 400-pound chick with the I remember the day that we followed each other last year for some reason, and I have no idea that was you. And then I actually got rid of my first account. I don't know if you remember that, but I had an account for like 9 months, and then I trashed it, and then I came back, but I had no idea that was you. That's funny.
Yeah, well, I did it. I mean, I was myself at first, and then I realized pretty quickly that female accounts got a ton of followers really rapidly. So I was like, I don't want to pretend to be a woman. I'm not going to catfish people, but I think it'll be funny if I'm just this like morbidly obese chick in an American flag bikini with like really hardline libertarian thoughts. So I became libertarian thought, but with the capital THOT, like that hoe over there. And people seem to really get in on the joke. People still are mad that I don't bring it back, but it is what it is.
You've got a brand to display now, so you can't fool around anymore. So
right. Yeah. Well, and that's the other thing. I don't know about you, but I didn't take this very seriously at first. It was truly a passion project. I didn't expect to find the audience that I did so rapidly. I'm very grateful for it, and I just hope that it's a sign that there is reason for hope moving forward.
Yeah. So like the first, I don't know, 10 interviews I did were just like me and a friend just talking to each other about stuff. What were your first few episodes like? Was it just you ranting, or
Yep.
How did it go?
Yep. Yeah. First, I think like probably 7 of my first 10 episodes are just me screaming into the mic because I was so upset about the lockdowns. I couldn't believe it was happening. I couldn't believe the American people were allowing for it. I was just flipping out. And then that was my method for venting. The audio quality shit, I would not recommend people go back and listen to my catalog. And then I had my dad on, I had my stepdad on. I was just kind of figuring out what I was doing and figuring out, what it was about and what my message was. And probably by episode 20, 25, I started to have a decent sized audience, and I was like, whoa, this is crazy. And then over the past month, it's just exploded. So it's wild, man.
Yeah. No, the thing that I was really impressed by, and you've probably noticed this too, is how willing everyone in the Liberty movement is to elevate people, and Dave Smith, Kerry Wedler, Pete Quinones, I've had Spike Cohen, Larry Sharp, like all these guys. If you just get in contact with them, they're like, yeah, sure, just let me know when. I wasn't really expecting that,
Yeah, me either. And I made this point on a prior episode, but I think that the thing to keep in mind is, like, first and foremost, we're all really passionate about this. So, like, whether or not you're a small account, I do small shows all the time. I don't care. It's like, I want to try and assist as much as possible, especially if you're messaging in a way that I appreciate or I support. I think that it's really beneficial to try and get as many voices out there. And then, whoever wins the battle to get to, to Dave's level, I could care less. I just want someone to do that. And the more people that do it, the better. And I think that the other thing to remember is, like, sure, Dave Smith and Larry Sharp and Pete Quinones are all famous to us, but they're not really famous. I mean, they're not like, they're not Kanye West, Dave's been on Rogan a few times, so he's probably the most famous of the bunch. But I mean, these are real people. They're good guys, and they're very passionate. So in hindsight, it doesn't surprise me, but in the moment, yes, it surprised the hell out of me that these guys were as gracious as they were.
Yeah, I know what you mean, because I remember when I had Dave Smith on the first time, and I sent it to my family, and I was like, guys, I had Dave Smith on, and they were like, who's that?
Exactly. Yeah. Every time I send it to my family, and I'm like, you won't even believe who I had on this week, and they're like, and they never know who I'm talking about. So I think that's the other thing that helps me stay calm during the interviews is, like, I try and remind myself, they're very, very famous to you, Clint, but they're not that famous. It's okay. Like, it's okay. You can talk to them. How do you deal with nerves?
Well, it's funny. I mean, I've just gotten, like, more relaxed as I've gone on. I remember Vermin Supreme was the first, like, real guy at all that I had on the show. And I remember I was nervous even talking to him, but he's like, I don't know if you've ever talked with him. He's so chill, and he's hilarious, obviously. So he kind of actually, he calmed me down, like, in the interview by just being such a chill guy. And then, so I had Spike Cohen on a couple months after that. This was still during the election. And he was really chill too. So the more and more I did it, the more I realized, like, it's kind of like you said, like, we make a big deal out of it because to us, these guys are, big deals, but they're not to anyone else. And these guys don't think of themselves as big deals. I remember when I had Larry Sharp on, to me, that was so cool. It's like, oh my God, Larry Sharp, he's the 80-20 rule guy. He's like, so everyone knows who he is. And the first thing I said to him when we were doing the video was like, boy, I'm a big fan of you. You're real great. And he's like, well, I don't think I'm that great. This is the Liberty movement. It's a pretty small pond. It doesn't take much to get big. And I mean, you and I are, we're examples of that. Like, you and I are nobody, and we're already, like, sort of well known. It's like, kind of. I mean, it says more about the Liberty movement than us, I think. You know what I mean? It's like,
I totally agree. Yeah, and it's funny because sometimes people will describe me as, like, a big account or like a big show, and I'm like, dude, no. I'm just simply not. I mean, I really appreciate it. I appreciate that people feel that way. But I think that's probably how the other guys that we're talking about, that we idolize, how they feel about it too. So I think that the longer I've done this, the more I've got to feel like, okay, maybe I am their peer, maybe, like, I still don't feel it in my heart, but the kinder they are, the more welcoming they are, the more I feel like it. So it's great. And I'm trying to do the same for people.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, pay it forward. That's what I mean, I like you, I try to go on small shows if people want it, and, just share the love. And it's really encouraging to see that starting to bloom in the Liberty movement. I mean, I feel like the unity growth thing is finally catching on. Like, it's more attractive than the stupid isolation and division that we've been grappling with for so long. I think people are finally sick of it, and they're looking for something else.
I agree. I mean, I think that the issue was, and it's very, see, this I'm going to kind of push back here because it's very easy to feel like you're unifying when like the people that you agree with get in power, which is kind of what it seems like is happening. I think the true test will be, will the, you know, the Mises Caucus be as welcoming, be as unifying once I forget her name, Jesus, Angela McArdle. Yeah. Once they're in positions of power, will they still continue to welcome people with dissident viewpoints? And I personally think they will. I mean, we'll find out. But I think that the biggest reason I was so energized and so opposed to the current structure of the LP was not because I'm racist, not because I want, you know, exclusively white people in the LP, the furthest thing from it, but because I simply wanted a party that recognized that, you know, our principles benefit people of all creeds, nationalities, colors, ethnicities, everything, you know, and we don't need to pretend that we don't have to change, we don't have to virtue signal, we don't have to do any of that. We have to tell people what we actually believe and how that benefits all of us across the board. How we can help Black Lives Matter with our philosophy. And I didn't feel like the LP under its current iteration was doing that, and it really rubbed me the wrong way. It felt like a losing game, and the Sarwalks of the world and whatnot that were continuing to push that messaging and trying to push out people that pushed against it, I thought was a huge problem. So
yeah, I mean, I was listening to Peter Schiff the entire lockdown duration, or, you know, still going on, but all last summer. You know, when it first started, he was yelling about it more loudly than anyone like in the Libertarian Party was. You know, there was very little opposition to it.
That too.
I mean, there, you know, to singular people's credit, you know, singular people were calling it out, but there was obviously not this big centralized message against it from the liberty movement. It was pretty bad. And yeah, that was so obviously the issue to get everyone behind. And, you know, because libertarians, you know, we're a joke to everybody and they don't know what we stand for. And they think we do stand for like big crony corporate business deals and bailouts. You know, that's what a lot of people think when they hear libertarian. They think like big business, you know, corporate deals, whatever. They don't really think of us as people who think that we should have just let everybody sink who failed, you know, as far as the big business world goes, and that we shouldn't have been bailing out Boeing. We shouldn't have been, you know, subsidizing big companies that just ended up firing everybody the day after the expiration of, you know, whatever the terms were for their PPP loans or whatever.
Right.
So yeah, we just really dropped the ball. And so to me right now is all about rebranding. It's not even necessarily about winning anything right away. It's just about saying, this is what we stand for. And I mean, I think we kind of think the same. So
yeah, no, exactly. And I think that it doesn't do the Libertarian Party or capitalism any service to allow people to think that we don't believe the things that they think we do. You know, like they think that we're all about big business. It couldn't be further from the truth. Like, I'm for big business if it succeeds on its own merit, but that's a rarity today. You know, we have very few companies that actually stand on their own 2 feet. And I think that it's really important that we explicitly message libertarian beliefs and no virtue signaling nonsense, because anytime you start to virtue signal or you water down the message, you get into a point where people no longer know what you believe in, because it's like, wait, aren't you the party of individualism? Aren't you the party of like do it yourself type mentality? And then you're like, well, I read some of the tweets from the LP accounts and I'm like, I don't know if that's actually what you're about, you know?
Yeah.
So I feel like we're remedying that, and I'm very grateful for it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, you know, a lot of people say Twitter isn't real life, and that's definitely true. But in the lockdown, yeah, I know. But it is like more real life than it's ever been before, or social media in general is, because so many people have been communicating that way, and so many people have been pushed in there. Like, I don't know if you had Twitter at all before this. I didn't. I never had Twitter.
I did, but I didn't use it until like 2 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, and I didn't have, I didn't have a YouTube channel. I didn't have like any of these mediums I use now. And we were all kind of forced into them because that was the only way we could still communicate with a lot of people who weren't in our small circle, especially if you're in California like you are.
Yeah.
So I think our online messaging is actually more important now than it ever has been because, you used to be able to have giant rallies and go to big events, but, it's kind of hard when your government is going to throw you in jail if you try to do that.
Yeah. Well, not only that, but it's the biggest opportunity ever. Like that was the reason I got so enraged and engaged, was because I was witnessing the greatest opportunity for libertarianism in my lifetime. In my life. Like, we were locked in our fucking houses. Like, it was bad shit was happening. It was the worst moment, and that was the best moment for the Libertarian Party if they knew how to capitalize on it, if they knew how to message. And it wasn't about like, oh, we're gonna wait and see if this virus is as bad as they say before we decide whether or not we're opposed to the government locking us in our houses. No, the Libertarian Party is opposed to locking you in your house, period. It doesn't matter if it's the Black Plague or the bubonic plague or anything in between. Like, no, you don't lock us in our houses. You don't take our guns away. We are free people. We do it voluntarily. You can advise us. We can respond. That's what we do in America. We don't do anything other than that, ever. There is no emergency clause that gets rid of the Bill of Rights. And they weren't saying that shit. They didn't say it. For fucking 90 days, at least, they didn't say a word that seemed anywhere close to what I was about. And that's why I had to fucking get, I had to do my own thing, because I was like, y'all ain't doing it. I don't know what's happening over there. I don't know if you guys have been taken over by the CIA. I honestly don't understand why you're not messaging how I am. And I say it jokingly. I don't know if it's true or not. I don't think it's true, but like, when you see this opportunity in front of you, and you're like, I've been a libertarian basically my whole life, because I'm a second-gen libertarian. I'm very unique. I'm rare in that regard. But I saw such an opportunity, and they were just like, well, yeah. We'll see. We'll see what happens. We'll hashtag a few things, and we'll see if we get 5% of the vote. It's like, fucking hell, man. This is not about the votes. It's not about the votes. It's about saving this country from itself at this point. So.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we need the CIA to intervene to do that to us, though. Looking at our past, like, that's what we always do,
I agree. I agree. Yeah, and that's why I said I don't think it's necessarily the case. I'm just saying the messaging was so bad, it makes you wonder. That's all.
Yeah, I mean, like, you have Trump versus Hillary, and the messaging was basically, we're moderate and we're normal. And, when things are so obviously not normal, when Donald Trump has become the Republican nominee, it's like, hey guys, maybe that's not what you should be saying right now. But so do you remember like the moment you decided you had to do something? Because like you, it was building up with me, and I remember it was in the end of March, so pretty much exactly a year ago right now. I was in Tucson, Arizona, and I had just moved from New Hampshire, and I had a bunch of job interviews lined up out in the western states, and they all evaporated when the coronavirus hit, so I was kind of just at a standstill, and I was staying at my uncle's house, and I was in their little they have like a visitor house out back in their yard, so I was just like hanging out in there, and we were all isolating because we didn't know what the coronavirus was yet. Everyone was still scared. They didn't know how serious it was, so I was just there by myself. And I had like 65 friends on Facebook, maybe. And I was just spamming stuff about the CARES Act, how terrible it was and how horrible it was. And I'm by myself alone with 65 friends who, it's like my grandmother and my aunts and uncles and like people who don't give a fuck. And, I know what's going on because I'm listening to the people who are talking about it and uncovering what's in the bill, while pretty much the entire country is just like, oh, this bill's going to save us. It's going to give us the needed relief and, blah, blah, whatever. And I realized, okay, I've got to do something because, I can't reach anybody in Facebook or in this little shack behind my uncle's house. Like, I've got to start something. And so I remember that was the moment, and it took me a little while to get going. But did you have like an exact moment like that where you just snapped and were like, okay, fuck it, I've got to do something? Or
yeah, actually, I think I do. I have a very bad memory, but I remember this one pretty profoundly because it was the day that they announced the lockdowns in San Diego, which is where I'm from in Southern California. And and they said that the following day the beaches would be closed. And I have an anxiety disorder, so I went for a walk because I was freaked out. I was like, this is dystopic nightmare type shit. I don't know how this plays out. I don't know how this ends. I have millions of dollars that I manage in investments. I am very, very nervous about what's coming. So I walk to the beach by myself, 8:00 at night, and I go to the beach and I sit down on the sand and I meditate and I just like, I look around and people are kind of like, they're not really cherishing it how I am. I'm like, this could be the last moment for a very, very long time that I get to, be on the beach. And I was right. It was a long time. And I just sat there thinking to myself, after I meditated, after I calmed myself down, I was like, okay, I have to do something, like I have to do something. And this was before, I mean, this isn't even about the Libertarian Party. This is just purely about, freedom and loving my fellow man. I was like, I have to get involved in some way. And I had already done a podcast for a few years with some of my buddies that was just like stupid, talking shit to each other. And we had stopped that like a year prior. So I already had kind of the knowledge, the equipment. And I was just like, okay, well, my Twitter following had got up to like 1,000 followers or something. And I was like, well, I'm going to just do it and see what comes of it. And I started probably a month later because I had to remind myself how to do everything. I had to download a few additional programs and figure it out. And then as soon as I got on the mic, I was like, all right, this makes me feel better. I'm not going to stop doing it. So I just kept hammering.
So what had you been doing like leading up to the coronavirus? Had you been involved in politics at all? Or is that what kind of, I know you said you were a libertarian, but were you just kind of like spaced out and then that drove you into action, or were you involved before that?
Yeah, I wasn't involved in the party. I mean, I've always voted libertarian. I mean, obviously I voted Republican when Ron Paul was on the ticket, but for the most part, I always voted libertarian, and I still think that's voting libertarian for the record. But yeah, I wasn't really involved because I was dedicated to my business. I was dedicated towards like financial success and trying to provide for my family if I eventually have one. So I was really driven towards that. I would still talk politics with friends and family a lot. Everyone would come to me with any political topic because they always knew that I'd have an opinion and I'd be engaged. But no, I wasn't involved prior.
Yeah. It's weird. I had been interested in Ron Paul's campaign when I was in high school in 2012. I graduated that year, and I just barely missed the mark to vote for him. I wasn't quite old. I turned 18 like 3 months after the primary. Then Rand Paul I'd been very excited for, but that just turned into a joke. And then after that, I sort of became a libertarian. I left the Republican Party because I was just done with them, but I didn't really get involved in the Libertarian Party because Gary Johnson, I don't hate Gary Johnson, but he was just like not that good. He was just kind of a joke. And so it's something I never really cared about. But then, after the Democratic primary, how that went, and, we ended up with Joe Biden, and then we have Donald Trump again. And then we had all these crazy tyrannical government mandates come down, and neither the Republicans nor the Democrats, other than like Rand Paul, really did anything to oppose any of it. I was like, okay, I guess I've got to get involved and I've got to do something and I've got to make something out of this joke. So I actually officially joined the Libertarian Party last summer. Like I'd been an independent, but I've heard you say a bunch of times, it's pretty sad when it gets to the point that you have to get involved. Like I feel that way too. Like, I mean, I feel like it makes a lot, it's better. I mean, you have experience with finances and you understand how the financial system works a lot better than I do. Like I'm just a fucking truck driver dumbass, like I'm just a high school graduate who sort of pays attention to stuff, like that's all I do. And it's just like, what the fuck?
don't sell yourself too short. I mean, I think that the truth is that this stuff, I mean, even though it seems very complicated to the average person, if you read a handful of the things that we're talking about, you would get and you have, a decent upbringing, a decent level of common sense. Like these are not ungraspable concepts. So like, I don't really think it takes like a deep Austrian economic background to to understand and to propagate these messages. It helps. It certainly helps. But a truck driver can absolutely, speak eloquently about, freedom and what it means to succeed on your own. I mean, you're out there doing it daily. So I think that it's actually really important. I think it's important that we have blue collar type libertarian people that are involved too. I guess I would be considered white collar. I don't know. If you have your own business, I still kind of feel like it's blue collar, but since I manage, a bunch of money, maybe that would be classified as white collar. I don't even give a fuck. Whatever the difference is. I think that it's important that anybody that has these beliefs gets involved. Like, it's not enough to be on the sideline anymore. And I know that if you have kids, if you have family, if you have to, look after them, okay, I get that. Like, family first, priorities first. I totally get that. But keep in mind, if you don't get involved, your family may be very much jeopardized. Like, this is no longer, 03 or something where it's like, things are bad. I mean, things are bad for sure. But like, this is really bad. This is like you better fucking do something about this, man. Because if you don't, I mean, you're looking at the Libertarian Party, they ain't doing shit. So like, everybody that's on the sideline that's been like, oh, the LP sucks and blah, blah, blah. I was one of them. them for a very long time.
Me too.
It's on us. It's on us now. Like, it's time for the changing of the guard. It's time for the next generation who didn't want to fucking do this to get involved. Because when the people that don't want to do this get involved, shit might actually change. That's what we actually need. We don't need the people that want to be career politicians. I could give a fuck less about having any political power ever in my life. I am a independently wealthy guy. I don't care at all about politics. I care about being free in my fucking life. That's what I care about. And if you don't get involved, I don't think you're going to be free ever again in your life. Like, we have to fight back. And I'm glad to see that so many people are starting to do it.
Yeah, it's great. We've got our boy Magnus Panvidya in the chat.
Hey, Magnus.
So this is true. I have kind of I've become more of an anarchist lately, and I've heard you say that that's been a sort of recent transformation for you too. So how did you come to that conclusion, and how long ago was that?
I think it was probably from Twitter. I think following so many people that Ace Arcus is one of them. A bunch of the guys that I just found myself following more and more people with the black flag and realizing like, oh, maybe I am more of an anarchist. I still think I definitely would define myself as an anarcho-capitalist. I do not classify myself as just a straight anarchist, because you get into the weeds with the leftist economic models and things like that, which I do not agree with. I still think that it's theft if you take people's property. So I'm an anarcho-capitalist. But yeah, that was kind of the arc. And then I read some Spooner. I read a little bit more that kind of started to open my eyes. Like, okay, I mean, Rothbard was, had me on the path. I was on the path already. I just didn't know it. I just didn't know that, like, I really probably am one ultimately.
Yeah, it's funny. Those are those guys I've been reading too, is Rothbard and Spooner. And it was also Twitter that kind of turned me into an anarchist, along with everything the government's been doing. I mean, there's obviously that.
If you were a libertarian in 2019, I think you're probably an anarchist in 2021. Like, that's how it should go. Unless you were one of the people that was scared to death from the virus and went the authoritarian right method. I just can't imagine doing that. So I'm grateful to see that not many have, thank God.
Yeah, it's funny. When I first started my show, I was actually insistent that I was not an anarchist, because I was trying to, and I wasn't at the time, but I was trying to appeal to people who weren't comfortable with anarchy. And I was like, no, I'm not. Like, I really think the government should do this, this, and this. And, throughout the year, having people on the show, listening to different podcasts, being on Twitter, reading, different books, I'm just like, yeah, no, okay, fuck it, I am. I mean, it was like, you can't help it. I mean, if you're arriving at a true conviction, it's not a conscious decision you're making. Like, you're not like, okay, I want to be an anarchist now. Like, if it's an honest place you arrive at, you can't help it. Like, your mind goes there. Like, okay, I can't do anything.
Yeah, this is not some like goth phase. I'm not some like rebellious teenager. I'm fucking 38 years old. Like, I don't want to be this black sheep anarchist guy. Like, I'd rather just be, a normal person that everyone could talk to. I still think I am, but I definitely didn't seek it out. I wasn't like, oh, anarchy sounds cool, I'm gonna be that. It was like I hesitantly accepted the fact slowly over time,
Right.
that I was one. That's all there was to it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a religious person anymore, and I was raised very religiously, and it was a very similar transition because I didn't want to let go of any of those religious beliefs because there's a lot of scary thoughts about what's going to happen to you if you stop believing in certain things. But when you have honest convictions, you're not, as I said earlier, you're not consciously making that decision. It's just something that's happening to you that you can't resist.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it was really the same thing with anarchy. And I'm not, I don't know about you, I'm not like a super staunch anarchist at this point. I'm pretty new to it, so I'm actually reading more into it so that it's a very defensible position. I don't know what stage you're at with that, but
yeah, I wouldn't define myself hard one way or the other. I think that, and I don't think it's necessary, honestly. Like, the odds of us getting to anarchy in our lifetime is basically nil. The odds of us getting to a reasonable level of minarchy is basically nil. So if you're going to fight between minarchists and anarchists, I think it's just stupid. Like, you should, you talk about unity a lot. I am 100% unified with anybody who wants to shrink the size of the state. Like, that's my unity metric. And if you believe that we should have just a military for defense, okay, I disagree, but okay, I'm fine with that. Like, if we could just get back to that would be a military that doesn't have intervention overseas every fucking year of my entire life. That would be a huge improvement over where we're at. So I don't really care. I mean, I just hope that we head in that direction, essentially.
Yeah, totally. So given your background and what I wanted to talk a little bit about the financial situation we're in now. My first question would be, do you think a lot of this was coming with or without the coronavirus, and the coronavirus was just the perfect excuse to let it off the hook?
I don't think so exactly. I mean, certainly the real estate market was overinflated. Certainly interest rates were too low. Certainly there was too much debt. Like, all of this was inevitably going to pop eventually. This was like, I don't know, throwing a nuclear bomb into a burning dumpster. I mean, it was absolutely mind-blowing to me, the amount of debt that they were willing to take on, the amount of printing that they were willing to do. On top of that, having people not work essentially for a year, which has been the case for, I don't know, 15 million people or something like that. It adds up to a shortage of supplies too. So, like, if I didn't know any better, I'd think that they were creating an inflationary environment intentionally. I don't think they are. I think that they're just idiots. I think they're Keynesian. I don't think that they really know what they do. I think that they think that they can get away with this. I think that they're wrong. I think that we will pay a significant price. The timing is the only thing that's in doubt at this point. But I mean, you can't just borrow money infinitely and expect the economy to continue to grow in a healthy fashion. Like, you're going to create malinvestment and bubbles across the market. And what we've witnessed, in my opinion, over the past 12 months now is probably the greatest bubble in the history of this country. And I'm horrified by it. I mean, the only reason that I'm not certain that we're going to see the implosion is if we go into hyperinflation. Like, there's two options. I really believe this. There are two options. We either have a hyperinflationary phase where we essentially degrade fiat currency globally so that we can just write off the debt. We just print and pay off our debt. Or we try and maintain fiat's hegemony across the globe, and we have a debt default, and we have a deflationary collapse. So I'm trying to hedge both ways. I don't know how it's going to play out, but that's been, probably the biggest theme in my show, other than ending the lockdowns, is to try and advise my listeners to prepare accordingly, because I feel like we're basically in 2007 again, but with a little bit more fuel on the fire, and it's just going to be bad, man.
Yeah, I mean, the coronavirus has certainly given a lot more cover to do a lot more outrageous shit, right? Like, they wouldn't have been able to justify even
printing
half
$7
of
trillion. Yeah. No. And I think that, as to your point about, like, would some of these things come about regardless, or did they use it as an opportunity? I think clearly the MMT people are salivating. I think that is very likely to be implemented at some point during the Biden presidency or the Kamala Harris presidency. I don't know which. But I think that they are laying the groundwork, because there's going to be such economic destruction that comes from what I think I still lean towards a deflationary collapse. And in that deflationary collapse, I think that they're going to print and hand out money to people, and it will be the beginning of MMT in this country. That's my personal belief.
So how do you distinguish MMT from what we're already doing? You're just saying at a different level? Or?
Well, it would be in perpetuity. I mean, that's the only difference. Instead of having unemployment insurance and PPP loans and all this other, short-term help, I think that it'll be a permanent fixture in this country. And I don't want to see it, man. I mean, we go that route, there's no turning back. You will have a completely crippled populace that cannot ever fight back against its government because it relies on it, hand to mouth. And I think that that's what they want, personally.
Yeah, I mean, I was making this point a few months ago. Compared to what a lot of these progressives want, we are not very reliant on the government, right? In comparison to if they were in complete control of our healthcare, in complete control of our housing, and complete control of our food or whatever. And look at how much control they have over us right now with the comparatively small amount of power they have over us. So imagine if there were universal basic income that you were reliant on, they could just cut it off at any moment to get you to comply with whatever they want. I mean, people don't really think 2 hours down the road with stuff.
It's even worse than that, man. I mean, if they're able to withhold your funds, they can also take your funds. I mean, they're going to have free rights essentially to just rob you blind if you become a political dissident or categorized as a terrorist, for instance, with all these terrorism laws. But if they have that mechanism, they can essentially excommunicate people from society. I mean, they can end you as a functioning member of society. They will force you into the black market. And I think that's why I had that episode on Monday talking about exclusively Bitcoin, because I think that if we're right, if MMT is the way they go, there is no doubt in my mind they're going to use it to punish political dissidents. And your only option will be to have anonymized cryptocurrency or physical metals, things of that nature, to try and survive it. And obviously I don't want to go that path, so I'm trying to prevent it in the first place. But if we do end up down that path, then we have to be ready for it.
Yeah. So I want to ask you about Bitcoin. I think it was when Dave was on your show, you were talking about how it has all the signs of a giant bubble, and you don't want that to be the case because you're invested in it. Mm-hmm. But how possible do you think that is? And do you think it's because it's in some ways similar to a fiat currency? There's really nothing backing it other than the will of the people using it? Or what are your thoughts overall on Bitcoin?
Yeah, no, I definitely wouldn't. I would not classify it as a fiat currency in that regard, because it does have limited supply. I mean, it is essentially made out of nothing. So like I get the comparison, but I think that it's very different. The reason I compare it to the kind of the mother of all bubbles is, like, people forget that when you have an inflationary period or you have a very frothy market, you will see all assets increase: real estate, stocks, bonds, cryptocurrencies. That includes Bitcoin. You don't see assets that go up 600, 800% in less than a year and not lift an eyebrow. It's a huge mistake if you ever see an asset go up 800% in a year and you don't go, I don't know. That's all I'm saying. Like, I'm not even trying to dissuade people. I'm not trying to tell people to sell. I think that Bitcoin very well may be the future. This may be a tremendous buying opportunity, but people are buying that asset on leverage. Young kids are buying it on leverage. It is being pumped largely by retail investors that are using their stimulus money, their unemployment insurance.
Right.
If that shit ends, if you have a debt collapse, if you have a deflationary collapse of any magnitude, Bitcoin will be dragged down with it as well. That's a fact. Like, there's no way that the stock market goes, down 40%, like I think it will, and Bitcoin skyrockets. Like, I don't see that happening, because you will have big hedge funds, people like Tesla. Anytime you have a deflationary collapse, there's a liquidity crisis. People have to get liquidity. What do they have that's liquid? Bitcoin's pretty fucking liquid. So you will see people sell in those moments. And I'm just saying that I think that there might be a better entry point for Bitcoin. I am not at all saying that it's garbage or anything like that. I'm a big believer, actually.
Yeah. So as far as the time frame for, when the stock market finally does drop, or when the bubble finally pops, when this all comes crashing down, I was listening to your episode with Pete, and you were saying that one of the things that is keeping that from keeping that from necessarily happening right now is the fact that the rest of the world is doing the exact same thing we are right now. Like, all their central banks are using the same policies. Have we dug ourselves into a deeper hole than most of the other countries that's going to make it harder to come out of, or what do you think?
It's a good question. It's a good debate to have. I can't say for sure, because ultimately it boils down to the economic strength of the country that you're talking about. So, like, obviously, if, I don't know, some small country, say if Ukraine had $28 trillion in debt, they'd be fucked, because their GDP can't possibly sustain that. Our GDP and our tax receipts are heavy enough that if you are able to maintain interest rates at a very low level, that it can be sustained for a while. We have the most debt, but we also have the biggest economy. So it's like, I don't know. You can go down the line and take all the percentages of GDP or tax receipts versus debt amounts, and you could measure them against each other and try and decide which country's in the worst possible position. I don't think America's in the worst position. I'm sure it's not. Venezuela probably is. There's a bunch of countries that are in worse or more dire straits than us. But the only reason, in my opinion, that America stands head and shoulders above the rest is because we have the reserve currency of the world. And if we continue to print money like this, we will not have it much longer. And I don't know that the central bank, obviously I know they value that position. That's why we fucking blow up people when they try and not use the dollar for trading. That's the whole petrodollar scheme. But I don't know that the Fed, I think that they may have too much hubris. I think that they may not defend that position as they should. And they should do what Paul Volcker did in the early 80s, pump interest rates sky high to cause the debt default, to cause the deflationary collapse. And that would be the way to sustain the dollar's dominance over the fiat currency system for the foreseeable future. But I don't think they're going to do it, because if they do that, you will see blood on the streets. People will riot. So
no kidding.
So that's why it's kind of a catch-22. They're stuck, and I don't know what the right answer is. It's a really fucked position, but it's fucked because they let it be. They took us down this path for decade after decade, and they just never had any fiscal sanity to try and remedy it. It's really stupid.
Yeah, I don't think a lot of people realize the connection between our foreign policy and the dollar's dominance as the world reserve currency. I don't think most people even know that we are the world reserve currency, or what the world reserve currency is.
They don't know what it means at all, man.
But they wonder, why are we bombing Syria, and why are we so friendly with Saudi Arabia, and why are we angry at Iran? Why did we kill Gaddafi? Most of it circles back to maintaining that dominance. And it's so weird. We've gotten so far down the rabbit hole that the military state is supporting like the fake monetary state, and they support each other in this wheel of impossibility that keeps each other afloat. Like, neither of them are really using real economics or real power. They just somehow perpetually keep each other afloat. And so I'm kind of wondering, what is going to be the stumbling block? Is it going to be from printing so much that the currency just does lose favor, or is it going to be something like Saudi Arabia just saying, okay, we don't really want to help you guys anymore, we're going to ally with Russia now? You know what I'm saying? Like, is it going to be a monetary or a military thing that actually brings the world reserve currency down?
That's a tremendous question. I do not know. I think that that Saudi Arabia isn't going to flip sides. We've done their bidding for decades. I mean, they also know very deeply that you betray America, we take you out. That's what we do. So I don't see any chance that the Saudi kings or prince or whatever are gonna go that path. I think that the biggest danger that people don't pay attention to is if they lose control of interest rates. I mean, if they get to the point where the Fed is literally monetizing every dollar of our debt, people will. I mean, you're already witnessing it. It happened partially because of the supply chain breaks that happened during lockdowns, but also all of the printing and all of the stimulus money that's just been sent out to people that has increased prices across the board. So if you see ever increasing prices, people will start to flee the dollar. And I think to an extent, you're already witnessing it. You're seeing it both in real estate because people are like, holy shit, I have to buy a house now because I may never be able to afford one if it continues on this trajectory. But additionally with Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. So people are already sensing it. I think that's the biggest difference between now and 08, 09 when we had the collapse. People weren't considering whether or not the dollar was going to die back then. No one was talking about that. I talk to people about that every fucking day now. Like Bitcoin has taught people about fiat currency in a way that I never imagined people to actually grasp it. They're like, well, that's just paper. I'm like, whoa, how'd you know that? Like, yeah, you're right. But like, who the fuck taught you? They're like, oh, Satoshi Nakamoto taught me. It's like, oh, beautiful. Like Bitcoin did more for libertarianism and sound money and Austrian economics than all of the scholars that have ever existed in history. I really believe that. Like Bitcoin has converted more people because it has shown them in real terms what limited supply means. Like if you have limited supply of a currency, that shit has value. And I don't know that you put that genie back in the bottle. Like I said, I think we'll have a better entry point if we have a deflationary collapse, but I don't even know where we started with this fucking conversation. What was the question? I just got so sidetracked. I'm sorry.
I think the last question I asked was just whether it was going to be a military or a.
Yeah. Okay, so that's where I was headed. Is like if you see rising interest rates, the game's over. Like that's the biggest thing that I try to advise people on. If you see interest rates get to a normalized rate of 4% even, our debt's not sustainable. Our real estate market's not sustainable. And then you'll start to see the fissures in the market as you'll start to hear, it won't be Bear Stearns. It'll be some other hedge fund or something like that goes bankrupt. And you'll be like, oh, that's weird. Why'd that happen? Well, there's derivatives markets that underlie all these investment vehicles. And these guys are all tied to each other. So like you see one big boy go, that'll be your Bear Stearns moment. That'll be the siren that's going off. This is over. It's over. Get out. So either that happens or we go inflationary. So those are the two options. I'm always the bearer of good news when I go on shows. Sorry.
Yeah. No, I mean, I know so many people who just think that this is all because of coronavirus, and after coronavirus goes away, everything's going to be fine. They think that's the only reason we're having any trouble with the economy or any problems with our money. It's just all because of the coronavirus. Everything's just going to go back to normal once the coronavirus goes away. What would you say to that?
Yeah, it's a huge mistake to view it that way. And I think that the biggest thing to drive home the point that we're in the biggest bubble in history is that our economy is fucked and our stock market is at an all-time high. That's not how it's supposed to go, folks. That's not how investing is supposed to work. Your stock value is supposed to be predicated on the profits that you make. And many of these companies, I mean, the big boys, Amazon and all the big boys have made a killing during this because everyone's been trapped in their fucking house. They can't go to the store and buy anything. But for the rest of the economy, the people, it's been a disaster. And I just think that it's a huge mistake to be throwing your money into the stock market at these levels. Because ultimately we haven't even witnessed the true economic damage. We haven't witnessed the mental health damage that's come from this yet. I think that you might start to see it. I think that perhaps these shootings that we're starting to see are probably a product of it to some extent, where people are hopeless and they've been trapped in their house for 8 months and they're like, all right, I've lost it. You see people beating each other on the street in New York. You see mass fighting at spring break in Miami recently. And people are like, oh, what's going on? I'm like, well, what's new? Like what is actually new? What changed over the past year? Oh, we were locked in our fucking houses for a year. Like, do you think that we're just going to bounce back from this? Do you think the economy is a light switch that you can just go, bing, we're good? No, it's fucking not how it works. As a business person, I can tell you it was devastating. So, yeah, I think that we have not seen the real damage yet, and people should be very cautious about believing that, lockdowns are over, everything's good again. If anything, if it ends up being good, it'll be because you will be in the beginning stages of a hyperinflationary blow-off, because all of that fiat that they've pumped in the system that isn't circulating because monetary velocity is dog shit, it'll start to circulate rapidly, and that'll be the true end of the bubble, in my opinion.
Yeah. Do you think that the summer is going to be just as bad as last summer as far as violence and riots and property destruction goes? Do you think it's just inevitable, and that I don't think George Floyd is why everyone was doing that. I think it was just a spark that ignited a bunch of gasoline. But what do you see the summer looking like?
I think that, honestly, I don't think that the collapse will come until the foreclosure and eviction moratoriums end. When people start to lose their houses and the government, stops sending the money every month, I think that's when you'll see the real, explosive stuff. I don't know if that'll come by this summer, because the moratorium is supposed to last through June. And if you request it in June, you can get like a 6-month extension from there. So basically, I think that we're greenlit for the rest of this year. Like, that's my operating thesis at this point. But I think that 2022 and thereafter is anybody's guess, man. Like, it could get really, really ugly at that point.
So yeah, how do they wean themselves off of that? Are we going to just end up nationalizing real estate, or what do they do about supporting that for so long and then just ending it? It doesn't seem like it's going to be possible because of the backlash you'd get.
Yeah, well, that's the question. I mean, that's exactly what Pete and I hammered out, is like, do they nationalize real estate if it goes that route? And or not real estate, but the banks, or real estate for that matter. I mean, that's Pete's more black pilled than me, so he goes to the dark. He thinks we're going to nationalize real estate. I still think that we, as long as we're armed, I don't think they can nationalize real estate, because people. That's 90% of people's that's their entire life savings is their house. So you try to take that from them, you're taking everything. So I would hope to God that people would fight back if that were to happen. After lockdowns, I don't know. I don't know if people would fight back. I don't know if we will ever fight back. But yeah, I don't think that that's likely. I think that it's more likely that they would nationalize the banks, or just print and hand the money to cover their losses. Basically pay for people's rent and mortgages for the remainder of this year, debase the currency further, and keep people in their houses until the end of this year, and then see what comes after that. But if they want to maintain the dollar's power globally, at some point they're going to have to stop this process, and right. That is where the deflationary default comes in. So we'll see.
Well, that doesn't leave us with much hope, but I didn't.
Well, it does. I think it is hopeful. I think it is hopeful, because you know it in advance. I am giving you this warning now. Like, you can actually do something about this with that information. If you get sideswiped by it, yeah, it's very tragic and just it's hopeless. But I'm telling you, you probably have upwards of a year to get ready at this point. So like, no tears. If you're listening to this and you don't do anything over the next year to get prepared, that's on you. Someone gave you a real warning and you didn't listen. So, we are libertarians. We still believe in self-responsibility. Like, it's on you. But obviously I hope that we have some political sanity. I hope that we have some savior that steps in and prevents all of this. I just wouldn't bet on it, as I'm sure you wouldn't either.
No. So just to recap and close out, give us a very condensed version of what people should do to prepare for what's coming. What would you suggest?
Well, the hard part is that, because I don't know if it's going to be a deflationary default or a hyperinflationary blowout, is that you're going to have to hedge both ways. I mean, right. So I think that holding cash, even though I hate cash, is a good idea, because if we have the deflationary collapse, you'll be able to buy assets as they decrease in value. That could be the opportunity of a lifetime. Secondarily, Bitcoin or gold, physical metals. I think that those are the hedges for the hyperinflationary blowoff. I don't like real estate, even though some people think that that's a good hedge against hyperinflationary blowoffs, simply because it's so largely predicated on interest rates. I wouldn't go that direction. Plus, the prices are already so high. So that's what I'm recommending is basically I'm not recommending actually, because this is not financial advice. But if I were to just talk about what I'm doing, I would recommend for myself, not you, to hedge both ways. So that's my belief. Hey, before we go though, I want to ask you, because I mentioned Savior, and I know that you're an atheist, and I'm sure you've heard the episode recently where I had on David Gronowski, and I've been just asking more and more about how do you expect, and I'll just ask you directly, how do you expect people to be willing to fight and risk their life if they genuinely believe that this life is all that they have? Because I've never been religious in any regard, but I am curious, as someone who was raised religious and is now an atheist, how you find that as a good selling point. Because to me, it doesn't seem like we're going to get enough people on our side if we go that route.
Well, first of all, I don't think I can make something up just because it's more inspirational to try to sell it to people. I got to tell them what I actually believe. But it all depends on how you look at it. If I thought that I was headed to heaven after this, and this life was just a meaningless, stupid drag that I had to get through, then I wouldn't care about what's happening in the future. I wouldn't care about this country. I wouldn't care about the government. I wouldn't care about future generations. I wouldn't care how miserable my life was, because this is all temporary. Who gives a fuck? You're going to die, and then you're going to live happily forever after. So who cares? I think this is the only shot you have. I could be wrong, but this is the only shot you have. So why not try to make something out of it? Why not try to make it better? Why not try to make it better for other people? Because if you're always just living for the dessert that you don't know is going to come, so you're not eating your dinner, then you're kind of missing out. So that's the message I have. But
yeah, see, I'm not trying to. I don't even believe in heaven, so I'm not even going that direction. I'm just saying that the messaging needs to be that there are things bigger than this. There are things that are worth risking your life for, and I have struggled to have that energy back when I was more atheistic, when I was more like, there is nothing after this. Like, there's no reason to fight, because I can't risk. My life. This is my mortal coil is so precious. Now that I meditate and I have more of a spiritual side, I definitely feel a greater level of courage and a greater level of willingness to take risk and to put myself out there. And I don't know. I'm concerned that if we pair an atheistic message with libertarianism, particularly given how really religious the foundational principles of libertarianism are, the endowed by their creator, and not necessarily libertarianism, but the founding fathers, at least.
Right.
I think that the reason that they were so successful with that message is because they called to something higher. They played into the belief system of the people, and they inspired in that way. I don't know. It's a recent thought that I've been having, so I just was curious to talk to you about it. That's all.
Yeah, I mean, we'll have to have another discussion where we really delve into that at some point. But
yeah, that's a deep one.
Yeah, I'll give my abridged answer though. I have actually become more inspired to make a difference since I have stopped believing in an afterlife or a higher power. For me, it's actually made me feel more personally empowered. Because I am responsible for my own actions. It's not some other boogeyman, tugging at my heart either way. And actually libertarianism to me is very individualist and self-responsibility. There's no, if you want to blame outside forces for how bad your life is in a libertarian world, you don't do that. You just say, well, I can't really do anything about those outside forces. I'm going to make my own changes and try to live my life the best way I can. So I think it's all how you pitch it. And I don't think we need to brand libertarianism with atheism or theism. I think it can envelop both messages. I think that you can make an argument either way. So I do think when people try to expel religious people from the liberty message, that's a mistake, because I have seen a little bit of that. I don't agree with that at all. I mean, I think
we need unity in this regard too. That is what I'm saying. You know, like you need to be welcoming to the atheistic libertarians and also the theistic ones, because I think that it's, first off, we don't have the numbers, so we can't afford to be kicking people out like that. Right. And also there's plenty of really great libertarians that are atheists like yourself and religious ones. I know many. So I don't know. Anyways, I agree. I think it's a deeper conversation that I would love to have at some point.
Yeah, definitely. I watched your video with Carrie, and that one was very interesting. You guys talked a lot about spirituality in that one, and I'd recommend everyone go check out your channel. So why don't you just give us a plug? Where can people watch you on YouTube or hear your podcast or whatever? Just where can they find you and keep up with you?
Yeah, on YouTube, Liberty Lockdown. Spotify, iTunes is all Liberty Lockdown, so just search that. And on Twitter at Liberty Lock Pod. I think I have an Instagram and other accounts too, but I don't use them too much. But follow me anyways. It's Liberty Lockdown everywhere else. So thanks so much for having me on, Reed. It was a blast. Yeah,
we'll do it again and have that conversation. I'd love to.
Yeah, I'll have you on too. I'll be on Part of the Problem tomorrow morning, so wish me luck, man. Oh, did I lose you?
Oh, no, we just had a little, I hear you now. Okay. You're on Part of the Problem tomorrow morning?
Yeah, so I'm nervous as all get out, so pray for me.
All right, I'll think of you. I can't pray for you.
I'm just messing with you, man.
All right, thanks, mate. We'll do it again.
All right, brother.